Jam Butty Boy is the reluctant fell runner. Episode 15. The Fell Race at Washday. JB got up early and went for a little walk around the campsite to take in the unreal place. It seemed to be a completely different country to the rest of England, which was either rolling green fields with villages, high green moorland, or the towns and cities. This was a ring of jagged mountains, and the sky seen twice. Once for real, and then once again reflected in the flat lake. The lake was black and seemed ancient. The race did not start until 10:30, so there was no rush for that, but there were a number of other people about. It was cold and fresh, but JB could feel the heat of the day coming on. When it was nearly 7:30, he went into the pub for his breakfast. He was planning on having a full English breakfast to set him up for the day, but when he saw the menu, he changed his mind. It advertised a famous haddock omelette, so he chose that instead. The breakfast area was clean and tidy, with wooden chairs and tables, with red and white gingham tablecloths. The morning sun came through the windows pleasantly. Probably one of the reasons why they chose this part of the inn for breakfast, thought JB. The only other people having breakfast was a group in a bay window. From the voices he could hear, there must be about 5 people in the group, but he could only see 3, as the other 2 were seated behind the back of an old wooden bench. There was a domineering, older, poshly spoken woman holding court.
"Of course, we have been to Nepal before, but never to that part of the mountains, and never so high. Terribly poor country, you know. Such poverty, but such happy people. Who'd have thought it? Always smiling and showing good white teeth," she said.
"Not as much poverty as India, my dear," said an older man.
"Ye gads no," she said. "Nowhere does poverty like India. You've never seen anything like it. We saw a dead person in the street and people walking by without a second look. Totally different outlook on life over there. And those ghastly flies. Gerald caught a severe case of Delhi belly, and we had to spend the last 3 days in the hotel as close to the bathroom as possible."
The woman droned on. Jesus, these posh people are so rude, thought JB. Just talking out like that in the breakfast area, forcing everyone else to listen to their conversation. I don't think she'd get away with that big gob in the cafe on Bury Market. Someone would give her what for.
"Anyway, Gerald, don't distract me. Back to Nepal," she said. "When our little troop went on our hike in the mountains, we were pestered by Sherpas offering to carry our stuff all the time. Took no end of shaking off, they did. One chap kept offering to give me a massage. I declined, of course, but Charlotte took a shine to him, ha ha. She wouldn't let him massage her shoulders, but he offered to massage her feet, so she let him do that. She protested she didn't really want to, but she obviously enjoyed it. We teased her about it mercilessly the whole trip. I took pictures, so I have evidence. I must get them out and show them around. There is poor Charlotte having her feet massaged by this Nepalese Sherpa. He had a big grin on his face. I say poor Charlotte, but she was definitely enjoying it, I can tell you. I must get that picture out to show you. After that, we decided to let him help us, just to tease her. It only cost a few dollars, and was so worth it for the entertainment alone. But ye gads, how fit they are in the mountains. They are like mountain goats, able to hop around while we struggle on. What was his name, Gerald? Gerald, what was his name?
Who dear?
The Sherpa, massaging Charlotte's feet.
Nicholas dear, said the older man.
No, his real name, she said.
Unpronounceable,
said Gerald.
Yes, he did tell us what his name was. This long, unpronounceable thing. So we called him Nicholas, she said. That was the closest we could get. He didn't seem to mind. They are so desperate for American dollars they would do practically anything. But so poor. He was wearing rags, wasn't he, Gerald?
Rags, my dear,
said Gerald.
I bought him some red shorts. His others were not quite halfway decent. Charlotte bought him a nice clean white shirt, so we kitted him out head to toe, really. I kept trying to find a barber to get him a haircut, but no luck. All the way up he kept offering to help me, but I kept pushing him onto Charlotte, ho-ho. I did nearly fall at one point, and he held my arm for a bit. He was strong, but all I remember is the touch of this leathery arm. Ugh.
She gave a shudder.
This leathery arm,
she repeated. Jesus Christ, will this woman not shut up? Thought JB. It's supposed to be a quiet breakfast room here. I'm going to have to say something in a minute. Just then his haddock omelette arrived with a pot of tea. It was presented still in the little frying pan it had been cooked in. It was still bubbling and looked really good. Thanks, this looks good, he said to the waitress.
Thanks,
she said, and went back through. With the arrival of breakfast, he was able to tune out of the other table's conversation and enjoy his omelette. It was very tasty, and he thought he might try and make one himself at home. After his omelette was gone, he sat back in his chair to enjoy the rest of his pot of tea. With the omelette gone, he ended up stuck back with the other table's conversation. Crikey, I thought those people were gone. Culturally, we've followed America, thought JB. This type of aristocratic system has been left behind culturally. I mean, they own stuff, run stuff, get jobs in quangos, to put their nose in the trough, and the government, politics and the city. But culturally, we're following America, right or wrong, better or worse, but that's what we are.
OK, suddenly said the woman. Could you all toddle off now, while I have a word with my son?
Righto,
said Gerald.
OK.
OK, dear.
3 of the group left. Gerald smiled at JB on the way out and nodded.
I know what you are going to say, Mummy,
said a voice from behind the wooden bench.
Do you now? Of course you do, dear, said the posh woman. Well then, why haven't you done anything about it yet? I'm not getting any younger, you know. I want to know everything is settled, now. It's time you...
The other person finished the sentence.
Faced up to your responsibilities, I know, Mummy.
JB felt there was something familiar about the voice.
Don't I know Mummy me, Bartholomew, if you're not doing anything about it, said the woman.
I don't like the name Bartholomew,
said the person behind the bench.
My friends call me Yorkshire, or Yorkie these days.
That's it. That's the voice. It's Yorkshire, thought JB. Oh my God, that old battle axe is Yorkie's mother.
Do these friends of yours know that one day you will be the Earl of half of Yorkshire?
No, said Yorkshire.
I don't want people to be influenced by it.
You can't avoid your responsibilities forever, she said. Look at me, in this God-forsaken place again, once a year every year. Why do I want to come to the back end of nowhere to open a little fell race? Fact is, I don't, but it is my duty, ever since your father agreed to it. So, once a year, here I am, mixing with the hoi polloi. That's how it works, Bartholomew. You turn up where you are supposed to be, and you do what you are supposed to do. It's not a question of doing what you want. You fit that in where you can. Duty! Duty, dear! And your duty is to get yourself a suitable wife and provide us with an heir.
But Mummy, I'm gay,
said Yorkshire pleadingly.
So was your father, dear. But he had the good sense to keep his peccadillo separate from his public life and marry me. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here carrying on the good family name. You know what you have to do, Bartholomew. Get yourself a suitable wife from a good family who understands these things, and then what you do on the side to keep yourself is your own business. She will have the children to occupy her, and if she has her own interests, you will be understanding in your turn too. As long as you are both discreet and keep it among those who know how things work, the world will tick along as it always has.
What kind of life is that?
said Yorkshire.
It's the life, said his mother. It's been the tried and tested successful way for 1,000 years or more in good families. Duty first. We are not barbarians, you know, Bartholomew. No, I don't want to hear any more about it, Bartholomew. You run along and enjoy your little run, and then you know what to do.
It's what makes me happy,
said Yorkshire, getting up.
What makes me happy? What does that even mean? Don't be so young, Bartholomew. You'll get over it one day.
Well, Mummy, you obviously did, said Yorkshire.
Ha ha! Very amusing, I'm sure, she said. You have the list of names of suitable wives I've given you. All fine, suitable matches from fine families. At least you get a choice, which is more than I did.
Crikey, I'd better hurry up and go, thought JB. Yorkshire won't want me to know I heard all of that. JB got up to leave, but it was too late. Yorkshire came out from behind the bench. For a moment they were both stood there staring at each other. Yorkshire went to say something, and then thought better of it, bowed his head, and went out of the room. JB waited for a moment to let him get away, and then set off. But it was no use. Yorkshire was waiting at reception, and it was where JB had to go to pay for his breakfast bill. OK, thought JB, let's get this over with. They were both stood there waiting awkwardly for the receptionist to come out. It was only a minute, but it seemed like an age, and then the young girl came through.
I ordered an egg mayonnaise wrap to take away,
said Yorkshire.
OK, I'll see if it's ready,
said the young girl. She looked at JB. I'm here to pay me bill. Table 7, the haddock omelette, he said.
OK, I'll go and get your bill, sir.
The waitress disappeared into the back. They were both stood there, Yorkshire nervously shaking his left leg and tapping his hand, impatient to get away. The haddock omelette's nice, said JB.
Yes, I hear it is,
said Yorkshire. Egg mayonnaise, said JB.
Oh yes, Billy Liddle used to eat eggs chopped up with a bit of mayonnaise. You know, a bit of moisture to help get it down when he did a long run. He'd make a long tube of it and just nibble at it all the way around. Thought I'd give it a try,
said Yorkshire.
You?
I'll probably take a Jam Butty, he said.
Oh yes, of course.
They were quiet for a little while. I wasn't being nosy, said JB, but your mother is rather loud. Do you not think you'd be happier to let people know your little secret? Yorkshire looked at him horrified.
About being gay?
He said. JB shook his head. No one gives a crap about all that now. But you might want to come clean about being a lord and all that.
The truth is, I've kept it quiet for so long, I don't know how to do it now, he said. I've built it up to be such a big thing. It's such a burden, JB. I don't know how to handle it.
Just say it and move on. You'll probably be surprised. People won't be that bothered.
Can't do it,
said Yorkshire. JB looked puzzled. Hang on, he said. Your mother's name is Lady Grey?
Yes, here we go,
said Yorkshire with a sigh. And you're a lord, so you're...
Here it comes,
said Yorkshire with mild exasperation.
The penny drops.
You're Earl Grey, said JB.
Yes, and pray go on,
said Yorkshire.
Has he figured out the final piece of the puzzle?
Hang on. And your best buddy is Brian Coffey, said JB, thinking out loud.
And yes, that's right, we're nearly there,
said Yorkshire. So together you are...
And the train arrives in the station, whoop whoop,
said Yorkshire. Together you're tea and coffee, said JB. Yorkshire pulled a face and shrugged with an expression that said,
And so what?
So why are we calling you Yorkshire and Three Coats? Said JB. Tea and coffee? That's great, that. And that's even better than fish, chips and peas. They're your real names.
Yes, well,
said Yorkshire.
We'll stick with Yorkshire and Three Coats if you don't mind. Those are our earned, not given nicknames. Besides, Brian's gone and got himself a number plate and everything.
And all the coats, said JB.
Quite,
laughed Yorkshire. Fair enough. Yorkshire and Three Coats it is, said JB, pursing his lips and nodding his head.
Shake on it,
said Yorkshire. JB held out his hand. I'll shake your hand, he said. But where I come from, my word is good.
Right you are,
said Yorkshire, smiling. Besides, said JB, you do know my name.
Justin, isn't it?
Said Yorkshire. Yeah, just in time, said JB.
Just in time? You're kidding,
said Yorkshire. No, said JB. Apparently my parents do have a sense of humour after all. JB went back to his tent to get ready for the race, as the time was now getting on. Camo and the other two runners did not speak to him after he had been accused of fraternising last night. Three Coats and his group occasionally glanced across. I could tell them all about Yorkshire, he thought. That'd give them something else to stew on. But it's his business to tell them all, or not. Gradually people were making their way to the start of the race. Come on, said Camo. Let's get this done. The three of them set off and JB tagged along. It was a much bigger race than the shrimp roundabout, and the racers had to crowd together. There was a raised wooden platform to their right, with Yorkshire's mother and the committee. They were talking to themselves, as if completely unaware of the racers and why they were there. JB could see Yorkshire through the crowd. He was talking to another runner and showing him a buff in Lonsdale Fell running livery.
Not only is this a show of membership of our club when you join, it is actually one of your most essential pieces of equipment, he said. In the summer, it can take the sun off your head and the sweat from your eyes, and in the winter, it can be worn over your face for protection from the wind and the elements. Also, it kind of warms your breath when you breathe and stops you developing as many colds and flus. That's a club trademark right there.
Yorkshire looked up to see JB looking at him and smiling.
Yes, well, but do your own research, of course, said Yorkshire. A good idea can come from all sorts of surprising places.
Camo and the other two runners were glaring across at Yorkshire and Three Coats' team. Yorkshire looked apprehensively at JB, wondering if he had told them his secret.
Are we going to start one of this race or what? Said one of the runners. Why are we waiting for that old battle-axe to finish gabbing? I swear if she starts to make a long speech, I'm going under that ribbon and just setting off, said another.
Yorkshire heard every word and took it personally. JB had an idea. Well, look at this long lanky streak of something rhyming with hiss, he said loudly at Yorkshire. You're not still wearing Falcon 90s? Surely not. Will you never learn, Yorkie? You need to get yourself a pair of these Midoris, or what Camo wears, Robotica White Stripes.
Don't be ridiculous,
said Yorkshire, looking up, his face a flash of indignation, about to protest, only to find JB smiling at him. Yorkshire's face changed to a look of understanding and he smiled. He walked across through the crowd and past Camo and the others and hugged JB close.
Thanks. Thank you for that,
he said. Camo, Three Coats and the others looked on confused. You're going to have to tell them your dirty little secret at some point, you know, said JB.
What, that?
Said Yorkshire. Yeah, that you're a lord and you own half of Yorkshire.
I suppose I should, but I don't want them to change their opinion of me, he said.
Don't worry, said JB. They'll still think you're a Burke.
I do hope so,
said Yorkshire seriously. Well, I've been training pretty well, said JB. So watch out. I might actually beat you this time. Yorkie held out his hand.
May the best man win, he said.
Oi! It was the woman from the previous race who had said, I wonder how many men I will beat today, the one who had challenged Camo over his banana skin. Yorkshire looked at her with disdain.
Oh, get over yourself, you silly sod. You're ruining a moment here.
He walked back to his group and wiped away a little tear. Three Coats tried to question him, and he shrugged him off. Camo came over to JB.
He's changed his tune from not fraternising with the enemy. What was that all about? Yorkshire hugging you and that, he said.
Don't know, said JB. Perhaps he's mellowed. Melanie worked her way through the crowd. She was going to join her team with Yorkshire, but came past JB. You look nice, said JB. Thank you, she smiled. You look okay. Ha ha.
How dare you,
said the banana skin woman, stepping forward to JB.
Excuse me, said JB.
You shouldn't objectify that woman in this day and age,
said banana skin woman. Who asked you to stick your big nose in to our personal business? Said Melanie.
I was only trying to help you,
said banana skin woman. Liar, said Melanie.
Well, why would I say it then?
She said. Because you're nasty, she said. You like being a bully.
That's a horrible thing to say,
said the banana skin woman. Really, said Melanie. How do you think you can make other people nicer by not being nice yourself?
But,
started banana skin woman, you are guilty of being the worst sort of person, said Melanie loudly. Boring. Now kindly go and bugger off, will you? Nobody wants to know. The runners around them cheered.
Hey, at last! Way, that's told her.
The banana skin woman shrank to the back of the group of runners, like she had tried to make others do. "See you on the way round," said Melanie, smiling to JB. "If you can catch me, ha ha."
True,
laughed JB. The runners were full of anticipation and adrenaline, and were wanting to be off and running.
Why are we waiting?
Said a voice.
why are we waiting?
In the old school kid fashion.
Ha 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 ha.
The crowd laughed. One of the race party on the raised platform spoke.
Oh yes, I'm sure we're all very pleased to have Lady Grey with us today for the 21st successive year. We just have 1 or 2 last-minute preparations to go through, and we'll be right with you.
JB could see Yorkshire cringing at the thought of his mother making everyone wait. To cheer him up, he shouted across to Yorkshire's group.
Where are you lot from then?
Yorkshire smiled, a big beaming smile on his face. He took a deep breath to gather his air and his courage.
People often ask us,
he started, and those on his team joined in enthusiastically.
where do you come from? So we tell them, Yorkshire, Yorkshire, Yorkshire.
Yorkshire's mother looked across at the commotion, and Yorkie stood proud with his chin up, smiling at her.
What was that you say? Said JB. I couldn't hear you.
This time all the crowd joined in.
People often ask us, where do you come from? So we tell them, Yorkshire, Yorkshire, Yorkshire. Hey, good old Yorkie.
Everyone laughed and cheered, and some patted Yorkshire on the back, and he smiled as happy as JB had ever seen him smile.
Good old Yorkie, cheering us up while we're waiting for that old gas bag.
The race organiser went to the microphone, but her ladyship snatched it off him.
Give me that,
she demanded.
We are not going to start until we get some proper decorum. Oh, bloody get on with it,
said a voice from the back. The crowd quietly laughed.
I'm waiting for quiet and some respect. You can make as much noise as you want, but we will not start until you are quiet. I can wait all day, you know.
Boo! Said a voice hidden by the crowd.
Who was that?
She said.
I want the name of that young man. We're not going anywhere until I get a name.
Finally, Yorkshire cracked.
For pity's sake, Mummy, just cut the ribbon and let us all go. You're embarrassing me now.
The crowd went silent and then sucked in a collective breath.
Mummy? That's his mum.
Yes, yes, I'm going to be the Earl of Doncaster, Earl Grey,
said Yorkshire.
Now you know. Is that okay?
Camo turned to JB.
Is the Earl of Doncaster?
He could be, but I've never seen him eat a cucumber sandwich with no crusts on. Have you? Yorkshire's mother seethed on the raised platform, looking down on them and shooting daggers at Yorkshire with her eyes.
Why, you...
she started.
You're such a disappointing...
JB cut across her for Yorkshire.
I bet you look good on the dance floor,
shouted JB. Lady Grey was shocked.
I beg your pardon,
she said.
I bet you think this song is about you, don't you?
Shouted someone else.
What are you all on about? She said.
Well, I'm sorry, everyone, but Mother would not understand those modern cultural references,
said Yorkshire.
All right, she shouted down the microphone. That's quite enough of that. We are not barbarians, you know.
Someone came walking through the crowd of waiting runners, jangling away. It was a familiar sound to JB. It was Algie.
Hey, Algie's back,
said JB.
Hi, Algie. Where have you been?
Said Camo. But Algie was on a mission. He was focused at getting through the crowd and walking with a determined look on his face. He made it through the crowd to the start and walked up to the ribbon. He fumbled around on his gear and found a Swiss Army knife and unfolded a pair of scissors. He turned to the crowd and held the scissors up high.
Yes!
Shouted the crowd.
Don't you dare, young man,
said Lady Grey down the microphone.
I have the official responsibility here.
The runners started to chant.
Go Algie, go Algie, go Algie, do it, do it, do it.
Algie opened up the scissors and put them to the rope. The racers went silent.
I do declare this race well and truly open,
said Algie. He cut the ribbon and the two halves separated and fluttered down to the ground. There was a second of stunned silence and then a cheer.
Hooray! Hooray for Algie! Woo!
And then all the runners set off at a dash, running past Algie, those close rubbing his bobble hat on his head.
Oh, bloody hell, not again,
said Algie, trying to hang on to his hat. When all the runners had gone, Algie peeped up from under his hat. Lady Grey was staring down at him with a face full of thunder.
Oh, bloody hell,
said Algie. JB let them all speed off and kept to the pace he had been running by himself. A valley, before turning off to go up the first mountain, you bugger. When they'd been running for about 20 minutes, he could see three coats in the distance, running with his inefficient manner, his arms flapping around. As they approached you bugger, the runners split into two groups. Those running up the little tarmac road to the longer but shallower route up, and those heading up the mountain earlier by the direct, very steep route. Three coats turned off early to go up the steep route. I'll do that then, said JB to himself. As JB started up the steep hill, like every other time, he immediately felt the difference, the big squeeze on your lungs. It was tough going, but he was moving in a steady rhythm and starting to pass people. He could see he was closing on three coats. I might actually be able to catch him, he thought. Without hurrying, he slowly started to gain on him. Eventually, without him knowing, he pulled level with him. Hi, three coats, he said.
How did you get there?
He said.
Did you take a sneaky shortcut?
No, I think I've just got better with practice, said JB.
No way,
he said. OK, said JB, starting to increase his pace a fraction. Three coats tried to keep up with him and started to blow.
I'm not going to be beaten by Jam Butty, boy,
he said. Oh well, nice seeing you, said JB, gradually pulling ahead and away from him.
Never,
said Three Coats, making a last effort to keep up, and then he suddenly gave up. JB pushed on up the hill. Whoa, I never expected that, said JB to himself. JB was moving quite smoothly up the hill. He turned around to look back down at the line of runners coming up the steep section, and then down into the valley below the little pub getting smaller in the distance, and turned to go back up. He passed a few of the runners on the way up, and nobody seemed to pass him. Well, this is quite surprising, he thought. As they neared the top, it started to become rockier, and quite jagged. Eventually he was on the top. There was a flat section, so he took the opportunity to look in front away from watching his footing, and could see the pathway undulating in front with a string of competitors. He thought he was running quite well, so decided to increase his speed just a little and see if he could go past some of them. He passed one or two, and then the pathway skirted round the top of the next mountain, New Bike. When they passed the little cairn at the top, the pathway dropped down and became rocky, and he had to clamber and scramble down over the jagged rocks. The next stage was a little flat boggy section with a large mountain pool. "There's Melanie," he thought. "I think I'm going to catch her as well." He ran on and gradually caught up to her. "Well, look at you running so well," she said. "Good for you. Camo is not that far in front. You might catch him." "Do you mind if I try?" said JB. "Of course not," she said. "Don't be surprised if I just disappear off at the end. I hate goodbyes." "Okay," he said, smiling. "But we'll always have Washday and the Viking graves." "Yes," she said, "and the Crossbay Run. Love that." "What will I do on it next year without you?" he said. "Go on, before you make me cry," she said. "Okay, Peaches," he said. "Okay, Jam Butty boy," she said. JB picked up speed a little and pulled away before the moment was spoiled. He turned back once and waved quickly to not be rude, but then turned quickly back so that it wouldn't start into something again. After leaving Melanie behind, the pathway then headed up to the next mountain peak, Sleepy Pillow. He could see the clag just over the back of it. As he approached the top of Sleepy Pillow, he could feel the temperature drop, and suddenly he was in the clag and couldn't see 10 metres in front of him. "Whoa!" he said out loud, and stopped. "That's weird. This clag is just coming in, just this little gully in the valley." He had a horrible feeling of wanting to push on, but not being exactly clear where to go. "My God, if you make a mistake up here, whoosh, you're off!" Just as quickly as it had swept over him, the cloud cleared and he could see the way ahead to the train of runners. "I'd better get after them quick, before it comes back again." He dropped down off the mountain top Sleepy Pillow, leaving the little clag behind. The pathway then rose up in front of him towards the mountain top Clark Gable. Clark Gable was an ugly-looking, bulbous mountain top, rather than the usual pointy Mount Everest-type mountain, or the humpback whale type mountain. It stood out as different to all the other mountain peaks in the Washday Valley. "Sorry, mate, but you're a bit ugly," thought JB, hoping it didn't get him back. "No sign of Camo. Perhaps he's pushed on and I won't catch him," he thought. He was happily following the stream of runners in front, gradually picking off one or two. Sometimes it was a little squeeze to get past on the narrow pathway. JB and the string of runners were now on a relatively long stretch of a curving path that was on the inside bend of the horseshoe ring of mountains. They were missing out some of the mountain tops along this stretch. The clag had come in underneath them, and JB took a little glance to his right to see the cloud below, and a glance to his left to see almost a wall of mountain. "God, it's weird to be running above the clouds," he thought, taking a quick glance. There was quite a chill breeze coming from the right, and he had a little shiver because he'd built up a layer of sweat coming up the steep mountains. He suddenly had a strange thought. "Hang on, the wind's coming from my right, yet I'm leaning slightly to my left. How come I'm leaning to my left and not leaning right slightly into the wind? He glanced again to his right. Unnoticed, because he'd been concentrating on the path and the footing, he was now running 2 foot away from a 3,000 foot drop into the clag and nothing down below. Oh my God! I didn't even notice. Or I must have noticed, subconsciously, so that's why I've been leaning left. So if I slip, I'm going to be able to grab onto the mountain. I didn't even realise I was doing it. He took his concentration away from the 3,000 foot drop and concentrated back on the pathway again, purposefully trying to put it out of his mind. Wow, isn't the subconscious amazing? He thought he'd been ignoring the drop away to his right, but as the path flattened out to a more secure, wider section, he felt a relief in his body. Right, well, I couldn't put it all out of my mind then. Thank God that section's over with. The course passed over the ridgeline and dropped down so that now there was a mountain peak to his right. It was quite a wide area and quite boggy. Crikey, you won't realise you were running at 3,000 foot up, apart from perhaps a little drop in temperature, he thought. He knew they were not far away now from where they were going to go over the highest mountain in England, Scuffle Pickle, and he started to look out for it. He thought he caught his first glimpse of it. Well, that wasn't strictly true. Taking quick glances up from where he was running, he could feel its presence. High above again, where he was, towards the top of this mountain, was an even bigger mountain that you could sense but not quite see, because it was surrounded by what looked like a permanent, unmoving clag. As he occasionally glanced up, he could see that the clag had just gently moved, revealing a slightly different part of the hidden, brooding mountain peak. "Bloody hell, look at that," said JB out loud. The mountain that he was on now ran out, and he stood there for a moment. His mountain dropped down quite sharply. He could see the giant wall of Scuffle Pickle in front, surrounded by that mysterious clag, and there was a little connecting neck between the two mountains and a sheer drop-off either side. The only way across was across that little neck joining the two mountains. JB took a look at Scuffle Pickle. Crikey, that's the daddy mountain, that one. Look at that. And to think Everest is 9 times that. That's mind-boggling. The little neck route across looked extremely precarious. Then up from the ridge on Scuffle Pickle was a narrow gully filled with loose rocks that looked dangerous to stand on. The gully then disappeared up into the clag. It would have looked impossible, but there was the little stream of runners making their way across, convincing JB's subconscious mind that it was indeed possible. He started the scramble down to the little ridge, sometimes having to put his hands behind him to help and go over some of the rocks on his bottom. Eventually he made it to the little ridge and quickly started to make his way across. When it widened out a little, he risked a glance to his right. The ground dropped away sharply, and then there was a low-lying cloud. JB could feel the pull of the huge void underneath. He glanced a quick look left to see virtually exactly the same. A drop-away, low-lying cloud, and then that quick magnetic pull. Bloody hell! Either way is going to get you. He made it across to the relative safety of some wider, flatter ground, and then was faced with the next task. The climb up the sheer gully filled with loose rocks, disappearing up into the clag. My God, it looks like the stairway to hell, only going up instead of going down, thought JB. Little negative thoughts would crop up into his mind. What happens if I twist my ankle? How remote is this? My God, look how high up we are. but it was a comfort to have all the other runners around him. "Come on, if they can do it, so can you." He started to clamber up the devil's staircase. JB started to climb the loose, rocked, steep gully. When he put his foot down, he could feel some of the rocks and the ground just slightly move underneath. "Hang on," he thought to himself. "This is slightly different, this. You can't just race ahead. The whole thing could just give way." He looked up at the runners above him to see when they put their feet down that the rocks moved and some of the smaller ones started to trickle. "Right, you need to get yourself up and out of here," he said to himself, and started to climb. The long gully had slightly different sections, sometimes a little bit steeper, sometimes not quite as steep. Sometimes the rocks were large, sometimes small. Sometimes it was hard ground underneath, and sometimes loose, almost sandy ground. He passed one runner who'd paused to take a breath. "Bit different, this," said JB.
"Yes, it is, isn't it?"
said the man. "First time for me," said JB.
"Yeah, me too. I'll be glad when I'm at the top of this."
"Yeah," said JB. "It's the devil's staircase."
"Ha! Is it? Is that what they call it?"
"I've got no idea. Might as well."
"Yeah. Devil's staircase it is."
JB was about halfway up when some loose stones came bouncing down. Somebody above was in a hurry. "Careful up there!" shouted a voice from the back. JB looked down and then looked back up.
Sorry,
said the person higher up, who was moving fast. But he must have been nervous to get off and hadn't actually slowed down. The next thing, a large rock came bouncing down. JB dodged out of the way. "Look out below!" shouted JB. The rock went bouncing down and narrowly missed the man who had shouted up. "Mind what you're doing, you bloody great pillock!" shouted the man down below.
Sorry!
"Don't be shouting sorry! Slow down, you bloody great wazzock!" shouted the man.
Sorry,
said the person high above. "Stop saying sorry and slow down or I'll wring your bleeding neck!"
Oh, sorry,
he said, finally getting the message and slowing down. Everyone cautiously started moving up again, trying at the same time to hurry and not hurry. As JB carried on up the gully, he felt the temperature drop around him and realised he was entering the clag. The clag became thicker and visibility dropped, but eventually the ground flattened over in front of him and he was up and out of the gully into a field of small boulders. "Oh, I've heard of this," said JB. "The boulder field at the top. I can't be too far from the top now." JB could see about 20 metres in front of him in the clag and carried on following those runners in front of him as the boulders in the boulder field got larger and larger. Behind him he heard a group of fell runners shouting, asking how to get across to Scuffle Pickle. "They must be on that first mountain before coming across that narrow shoulder. The clag must have come in and they can't be able to see it." Somebody at the bottom was shouting them and directing them across towards the gully. "Well, I'm glad I got across then," thought JB. In front he could see 2 runners quite clearly, and then 3 more in the murky fog, and then no more beyond that. "I'd better get a move on and not let them out of my sight," thought JB. He started to scramble across the rocks. His foot went between 2 large boulders and jammed down. The 2 boulders, making a pincer movement, pinched his foot where it was wider at his ankles. "Ooh! Oh!"
remind me not to do that again.
JB slowly retrieved his foot and rubbed around his ankle.
Oh, that sickness feeling. Ugh. Ugh, horrible.
He waited the few seconds it took for the sickness feeling to disappear.
God, it always feels like it's never gonna go.
He got going quickly, not to lose sight of the runners. His ankle was chafed, a little hot, but not too bad. The boulders became so large you had to climb rather than hop across.
I wonder where this top is,
he thought to himself. JB thought he could hear voices.
Surely not, he thought. That's strange.
And then out of the mist appeared, almost like a castle turret. It was a very large, round, circular windbreak, and all around it were people sat down, eating sandwiches, chit-chatting in a quiet, very British way.
This must be the top,
thought JB, heading towards it. JB was surprised at how many people were there.
My God, it's a little tourist spot,
he thought.
Still, I can't hang about. I've got this race to do.
JB scrambled on, leaving the castle turret behind and the crowd of people. The mountain started to drop down, and then all of a sudden the clag was gone and his field of view opened out to see the mountain dropping down in sections and the Washday Valley beyond. Coming up in a long line was a stream of people.
Oh my God, I've never seen anything like it. It's like a tourist destination. Everywhere else in the lake's being quiet, and then one long stream of people up here. That's proper weird. I'm normally on a hill all by myself.
There was another of the competitive runners nearby.
Look at all these people,
said JB to him.
Yeah, gets my goat, all these bloody tourists, he said.
I suppose they've got just as much right to be here as we have, thought JB.
Well, what can you do? Can't shoot 'em, can't ban 'em, I suppose, said the man.
No, said JB.
Yeah, that's probably a bit harsh, but we've got that longest staircase in the world coming up now, haven't we?
What do you mean? Said JB.
That longest staircase in the road coming up. All them flags all the way down. Goes on for bloody miles.
Don't know, said JB. This is my first time.
Well, mind yourself, can be slippy some of those, he said.
Will do, Tar, said JB, running on.
That sounds a bit off, doesn't it? Flags all the way down, bump, bump, bump.
JB could see some of the fell runners struggling to get past the line of tourists coming up the hill.
God, yeah, that doesn't look fun, he thought. Hang on, there's Camo.
He recognised Camo's giant frame and the colour of his top. Suddenly, Camo and one or two of the other runners broke off right to a little path.
They must know a quicker route down. I'll follow them, thought JB.
When he got to the section, he could see them just disappearing over the lip of the hill.
I'd better be quick. I don't want them to get out of sight and get lost up here.
He shot off after them. As he went over the lip of the hill, he could see them out in front.
A scree field, that's what they've come for,
said JB to himself. He could see them out in front, Camo waving his arms around, and he could hear him from this distance shouting,
"Woo-wee! Wee!" Oh yeah, he loves those scree fields, thought JB. This'll be my first time on something as big as this.
JB made his way down a little pathway, and then the scree field started. As soon as you put your foot on the loose stones, they started to slide.
God, Camo's right. It kind of grabs hold of your foot and takes you down.
It was a weird sensation, a little bit like when you were trying to learn to ride a bike for the first time, trying to get go-forward motion, but also trying not to fall and to keep your balance. You kind of had to put your weight on one foot. The stones would kind of grab hold of your foot and take off down, and then you'd have to switch your weight over towards your other foot and then do the same. It was difficult getting it quite right. Sometimes you'd come to a grinding halt, and other times you'd shoot off slightly fast. JB thought he was getting the hang of it, but then the stones seemed to grab hold of his right foot, and he couldn't get his weight back across to his other foot. He carried on down, his right foot going forward. "Oh dear," he said out loud, wondering what was going to happen. He made a quick decision not to resist and got his weight going towards that right foot. He was carrying down 1 foot forward, but his body started to turn. It was easier just to go with it. Before he knew it, he was travelling down the hill, backwards on 1 foot. I can't let this carry on too much longer. I've got to be able to see where I'm going." He let his left foot trail like an anchor, and it gradually swung him round so that he was now facing forward. "Right, I think I'll just take it a little bit slower," he thought to himself. He made sure his feet came out of the grip of the stones a lot quicker this time, and gradually made his way down the scree field and then off to a little pathway. Camo, being more expert on the scree field, had pushed on a little bit in front of him. "Perhaps I'm not going to catch him," thought JB. "Ah well. I've done pretty well," he thought. On the descent, he got into an efficient, steady rhythm, again after all his practice on duffer. From the height of the hill, he could see Camo some way off in the distance. "Maybe he's a bit far away. Maybe I won't catch him. I'll just run on and see how it goes." A mile later, the race went through a little hamlet, and JB saw Camo being served an ice cream by Arcala. "He stopped for an ice cream. What do I do?" he thought. "Camo!" he shouted. Camo looked around, his mouth full of ice cream and his ears full of Arcala's giggling laughter. "How did you get here?" said Camo in his usual half-angry way. "I don't know. I'm just running pretty well. I guess I must have improved," said JB. "Bloody hell!" said Camo. "I wouldn't have stopped if I knew you were right behind me. Yorkshire's way too far off in the distance to catch, I think. Once I finish this, I'll be catching you up." "OK," said JB. "See you in a bit then." "OK, you might catch me, but I'm not going to make it easy," thought JB, setting off. JB ran on for about 4 miles, without sight of Camo coming from behind, or Yorkshire in front. "The finish line can't be too far off," he thought. "Not enough time to catch Yorkshire, but I'm pretty pleased with my run." Washday Head became visible, where they had started and where they'd finish. In the last boggy field going up a slippery bank, there was Yorkshire, struggling with a limp. "Yorkshire!" shouted JB from the other side of the field. Yorkshire turned around. "No!" he shouted, and tried to hobble quickly up the bank. "I'm coming to get you!" shouted JB. "No! Not Jam Butty!" shouted Yorkshire. JB turned up his speed. There was no need to save any energy now, with the finish line not so far off. Yorkshire hobbled as fast as he could, but it was inevitable that JB would catch him. Yorkshire was dragging his leg comically. "No, no, no!" he shouted. "I can't be beaten! Not by Jam Butty boy!" "Oh, yes you can," said JB. "See you at the finish line, loser!" JB flew past him, and Yorkshire tried to grab him. "Careful there, you'll do yourself an injury," said JB, easily evading his lunge. He ran on, and Yorkshire fumed, shaking a fist, and shouted after him, "You'll only win because I twisted my ankle. You can't beat me fair and square. You're a cheat, Jam Butty boy. A fraud, I tell you." As JB ran towards the last short lane that took him to the finish line, he felt guilty about leaving Yorkshire hobbling. No, I can't do it, thought JB. He turned around and jogged back.
What's this?
Said Yorkshire when he saw him. Come on, said JB, putting his shoulder under Yorkshire's arm.
You came back for me,
said Yorkshire. You do the same for me, said JB. Yorkshire looked at him.
That's a good point, he said. I don't know if I would, you know. Sorry for calling you a cheat and a fraud and all that.
Oh well, said JB. Don't worry about it. We're nearly there. Might as well do it together. They hobbled awkwardly down the lane together until they were 50 feet from the finish line. JB could feel Yorkshire straining to go faster. You want to go on, don't you? Laughed JB. Yorkshire gave him a look of desperation. Go on, said JB, letting go of his arm and stopping still. Yorkshire gave him a quick look and then hobbled off as fast as he could, and JB walked behind. Yorkshire got over the finish line and turned round.
Ha ha! I beat you, Jam Butty boy! And with a twisted ankle too! He shouted. You can't beat me, Jam Butty boy!
No, smiled JB. I guess not.